Hey everybody, this is Claire, and this is Small Joyful Things. As always, I go to thrift stores or I go to estate sales, or sometimes I buy things from Craigslist. Not so much now, I kind of do a lot of thrifting, and I look for things that either make me feel happy or that I just appeal to me personally, or that I think might tell me a story. And then I bring them home, trying to find out as much as I can about them, and then tell you guys about them. So here's what I've got today. The first time ever, I have a watch. This is a lady's watch, obviously. This is a little gold tone vintage watch, probably from the 1980s. And in remarkably good condition. You'd expect it to have a lot more wear. The style, I believe, is very much like 1970s, 1980s. It has on the, you can see it, it says Persona Quartz, and down at the very bottom on either side of the 6 it says Japan MOVT, movement is what I'm assuming. Now if I just do a quick measure of it, this, by the way, this is a tiny watch, even for me, and I have small hands. Like you can see here, it's barely, like, it's not even 2.5 inches across while closed. It's absolutely tiny. So if I just measure off the actual face itself, you can give you an idea. It's not even 1 inch wide, 3/4 of an inch wide. Very small. Now if you actually want to wear it, you literally just open it up, pop it on the wrist, and you can see there, like, this is I have very small hands. This is just about fitting me, and that's about it. So that's okay. I actually had it upside down. Okay, so where did I get this? I actually bought this in a thrift store for, I think, $8. I picked it up because I looked at it and I thought that that is a classic piece of 1980s design. It's like I picked it up and I couldn't actually be sure of, like, okay, what era it's from. It's just that I saw it and I thought, wow, that kind of speaks of my childhood. I grew up in the 80s in Ireland. Maybe styles from the 70s are a little, happened there a little bit later, but I just saw this and I thought, wow, that's a really kind of classic thing. And the blue and the gold kind of appealed to me so much that I thought, you know what, I kind of like it. So I ended up replacing the battery, and I had to fix one of the little, like, these are spring loaded on the inside, but this one was basically popping out, unfortunately. So I had to fix that and then put new battery in there. The interesting thing about this is that, like, you might think that it's Japanese, where it says Japan movement, and it says that on the case as well. If you look at the back of the case, it says stainless case back, Japan movement, and that doesn't really give us, a whole lot to go on. But I found when if I can actually just do this again, there we go. When I popped this off, you can just see on the inside there, made in China. So that basically should tell you everything about where this watch is actually from. I'll just pop this back in. Now the problem is that I couldn't really get, it was very hard to find any more information about it. I was kind of hoping, because I like, going through with the costume jewelry, if any, like, actually nice watches show up in thrift stores, they inevitably keep them in the case. And, I don't really know enough about watches to recognize good ones. All I really know is that if you see, like, say, a Philippe, Patek Philippe, I think the name is, that if you see one of them, you should absolutely buy it regardless of the price, because it's worth, they're worth, antique Patek Philippe watches are worth thousands. I think there's some of the rare ones go for millions, but that's really all I kind of know about watches. I don't know a whole lot. I ended up picking this up because I like the style more than the actual fact it's a watch. And after looking at it, like, I can say, and I actually wore it for a day just to kind of, see what it was like. I thought it was very usable, a very nice, very usable little piece of, vintage decor. But I did get curious, like, exactly what does it mean that it says, Japan movement everywhere on it, but it doesn't actually say anything about, like, who is this company? What does it mean that it was made in China? And very quick kind of a look on the iPad. So really what I found, and I'll put the information down below, is that like the watch was definitely made in China. Where it says Japan movement, what it's actually talking about is the actual type of the internals, essentially in the middle of the watch, Japanese movement. It was just a thing in the mid that, like, obviously Swiss watchmakers used to be like the big thing. They used to have basically the entire market up until the middle of the 20th century, when the Japanese and Seiko kind of really got going with it, and they invented a new kind of movement. It's called Japanese movement. So I don't think there's any kind of equivalent of, like, you know, which one is better. The thing is that, you know, it's kind of like whichever one you kind of prefer, I think. I have a little bit of information here. I'm going to pop it down. I don't really understand a lot of what they talk about. To be honest, like, mechanical watches are even curiosities to me. I've had a mobile phone that has a watch built in, a clock built into it since I was a teenager, even growing up in rural Ireland. So the idea of, like, having and wearing a watch every day is kind of a little bit of an anachronism, because I routinely carry around a phone that has that function, plus so many more. Still, though, I think if you're going to have a watch, you might as well have one that's really there for the style rather than anything else. And this definitely, I think, has a lot of style. If you're into that kind of vintage stuff, this, I think, has it in spades, regardless of, like, the fact that it only cost me like $8. So the other question is, like, it's a vintage piece. It's obviously, it's the equivalent, the watch equivalent of costume jewelry. One thing to note as well, I cannot find any information about the company called Persona. I have looked, and my Google Foo has basically failed because I've got too many things kind of poisoning the search results. It's like the word persona as applies to watches, it's like it's kind of too generic. There's nothing really coming up. And if I do actually start looking specifically for watches, generally what I start to find are eBay listings for these, these like classic, vintage pieces. And that's really it. Finding the actual company that made it is almost impossible. And I've noticed that's not really unusual, especially for kind of, cheap stuff produced like 40 years ago. If something that was, made a long time ago and in kind of the 70s and 80s, and it came from, it was made in China, then, I mean, those companies are long gone and they were never online. So the information is lost and we will probably never know, which is a shame. But anyway, so what do we think? Let's go looking at eBay. What have we got? And now we do actually see some listings for these watches in, I have to say, every possible style. And although I would consider a lot of them to be very much of like the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, I don't think I saw any past about that era, or at least the ones that I think of being past that era. The unfortunate thing, though, is that if we actually go look at sold items, there isn't really much. Like, I bought it for $8 Canadian. It's probably worth about what I paid for it. I'm going to be putting it up on eBay probably for $10 US. Maybe someone will buy it for that, because, if you're into that kind of look, well, there you go. You can get it for cheap. So some people may like it. So there we go. That's my small joyful thing for today. I hope you guys like it as well. And now I'm kind of curious who among my viewers is still wearing a watch. So thanks very much for watching, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Haha, made it funny. Bye-bye.